Well, Nadia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the work you do.
Oh, you're so sweet. I was like, we have to hit record because we started talking about some really juicy stuff. And I'm like, hold on, we have to hit record. We are going to be talking about your amazing accomplishment of your book, Home is Within You, a memoir of recovery and redemption. Congratulations on completing this amazing work.
Thank you. It's been quite a journey.
How long did it take you to write it?
Gratitude. The actual layout of the actual book, like a year. But there's pieces in it that I had written, off and on the decade before, like my father's story and then the Arthur Carmona case. And the latter part was 6 months to a year.
Yeah, that is a grueling courage required process of really digging deep and like just bringing that all to the light. I'm so curious. What did you learn about yourself as you were writing this book?
That this was all meant to be,
Mm,
that all
like
of it, that all
every
of it was completely meant to be. And that past, present, future are all completely merged into one. And that I have that ability to see that, which is such a gift. It's such a gift. And that tapped into when I had a near death experience. And then later after treatment, jail, hospitalizations, trying to get back to that safety and calm within, that I was able to find in meditation. And so when I was writing facts at one point in life and then knowing what was here, I would kind of go back and forth, and then that would merge into the letters to my sons that are intermittent throughout the book. And just a ton of gratitude and how far I've come, how much I went through,
Mm,
and how much there is just to offer people that are in the darkness. So I'm blown away by today. So
yeah, listen, when I was reading some of the things that you had been through and like how much you have accomplished, I was like, oh my God, this woman has lived like 10 lifetimes already. The
everyone
amount
says that.
I've read it and I was like, I'm exhausted already. It's just, I mean, your list of accomplishments is crazy. I mean, just really highly productive. Congratulations on all your just so many things. Before we dive in too far, I do like to kind of go over a fun little game I like to call the lightning round, which is actually very slow. But I like to front load the episode with some resources. So when you think back to when you first got sober, were there any books that really helped you early on in your recovery?
I was adamant and very, very disciplined about my morning routine. And every morning I would read A Course in Miracles, the daily message sent to me. And my trauma therapist and my therapist to this day was the one who introduced me to the 40-day program. And then I just got the whole book and started getting emails and the book itself that I'm looking at it from across the room. So that one, then there were books like Rising Strong, The Jesus Calling, the Recovery Bible, like maybe, gosh, a dozen years ago, I remember having that in treatment. And it just was my way of, I would rewrite the phrase and the sentence in a journal, and then some thoughts, and have my coffee and just start the day like that. And I really, really enjoyed those regular readings. And so today I'm rereading Thich Nhat Hanh's The Sun, My Heart, which is pretty short, but I would highly recommend daily readings for sure.
Yeah, no, I stumbled across the Course in Miracles when I first got sober, like within the first, I don't know, 6 months or something. That was mind blowing.
Mhm.
Really incredible. Um, Since we were talking about self-care practices in the morning, what does your routine look like today?
It's the same. I do A Course in Miracles again. There had been a segue where I wasn't doing it, and I would sit down and do my morning meditation and read Japji, which is a foundational, very long poem of a set of pares and phrases. And it's part of a traditional Kundalini yoga practice called sadhana. And my spiritual mentor, Priya Jain, wrote a book and did a training. And so I was reading those every morning. It's absolutely beautiful. And then, so I will do my meditation. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's a half an hour is what I prefer, and have my coffee. And now I'm doing A Course in Miracles again. So then I go to my meeting, and then I walk my boys to school, and I start my day.
What kind of meeting are you going to?
I'm going to a 12-step meeting at, I was just going to say which one, but I won't for my privacy.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but yes, I do a
That's all set
12-step
maybe.
group. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
fellowship has known me for a very long time. So
Oh, I'm so glad you found a safe place.
yes.
That's a beautiful thing. The name of the podcast is One Day at a Time. And I've started asking people, like, how does that, I know it's kind of a cliche, but it's, to me, it's like a tool. How do you use that idea in your life, the one day at a time?
For me, it is definitely more about starting the day, like with a grounding and a sense of safety in my mind and in my body. My story has a lot of relapses, it has treatment, jail, hospitalizations, and my relapses were always short and hard. So sobriety would be for lengths of time. And so for me, it's very much related to trauma triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I become powerless to the choice of whether to pick up a drink or a drug when I'm not feeling safe in my body. And so one day at a time is really, truly connecting to that home, that sense of safety within me, where it's like a middle ground where I have a choice between, okay, am I going to my mind for answers or am I going to my soul? And when I can be in this place of safety, I'm able to sit in the balance of both.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean,
Speaking of trauma, I mean, I feel like you and I agree so strongly about trauma being the root cause. And over the years that I've been in recovery over the last 30 years, when I witness relapse, I'm convinced it's because there's unhealed trauma. And we were talking just before we started about how sometimes, like, the marking of time and the insistence that the groups have about people standing up in their first 30 days, how that can be a shame producing experience. Can you kind of just share with me how you experience that?
yeah. First, I have to say that, I mean, as children, we don't hear or learn that we're born from and in and always have this core innocence. And we go about in life in this like grin and bear it mode, and it's praised. And so there comes a point where our minds, what I call attack thoughts, that comes from A Course in Miracles, but just consume us. And so if we're not aware of how our mind works and that we always have this core innocence and worth, having not done that work, those thoughts would consume me, and it would be fear and self-judgment and the judgment from others. And that these fears of like, worthiness and fears of losing like my identity of like I really am trying hard, and all of that would consume me. And so I would allow that to prevent me from sharing. And all of my relapses were after lengths of sobriety where I had pride and my mind, had, okay, I got this together and everything is good. Prior to intensive trauma therapy, it was that self-will that I relied on, and it got me a lot of places and I accomplished a lot of things. But when there came a point where the trauma triggers and all the psychological and as well as brain damage was, I didn't understand it. And there would be a relapse. And I hadn't done that trauma work or that healing physiologically. It prevented me from going into the rooms and reaching out for help. And I think that that's really what led to the darkest times.
Yeah.
Later on, when I had a relapse, it was like, okay, I picked myself right back up, knowing that it had been a trauma response. And I was able to say, okay, you were in fear. This is what happened. This is your prior response, and you're aware of this. And so I was able to connect with that core innocence and worth and go back in with, my head held high, like knowing my true self and my worth, walk back in and just say it and start again. And I think that really was the key to the last, 9-10 years of my recovery, where there were 2 relapses, but they were short. And so I just was able to pick myself up, continue on the trauma healing journey. And what I want to say to people is it's a process. It is a process, and I am no guru. What I share in my Instagram lives and today is, I'm living the work. I have trauma triggers still, and I share how I walk through them, and then I share how, as I'm doing that with the little girl in me, I'm able to do that with my little boys, my sons in my life. And the more that we share that, the less shame there is to walk into the room and share vulnerably. So I could go on, but
No, that's beautiful.
I have is, it is one day at a time. And it is just sharing vulnerably, walking back in and having connected to our true self and worth, and not letting anyone's fears and judgments change our understanding of ourself inside.
Absolutely. Man, there's this idea I was reminded recently, pain recognizes pain. And when you were sharing about that feeling of trying so hard, man, that just hit me to my core when you said that, because it's not easy to get sober. And we all have these crosses to bear, these weak points that we all struggle with repetitively, right. Even though I'm sober a long time, I still have my stuff that gets me. And it's that whole trying so hard and still not reaching the goal, or perceived failure that invokes shame. It's so important. What I was hearing you say, or what I was really getting, was the self-compassion,
Right.
the reparenting of self with gentleness and compassion that allows us to continue to make that forward progress.
That's beautiful. And as you were speaking, you were describing what a home should feel like.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That would
Safe and
evoke
compassionate.
so many things and different people. And when we ask ourselves what the ideal should be, it should be a place where there is no fear and no judgment. And I believe that we have to, and that we can, no matter where you're at on your journey, no matter how far you've fallen, no matter what anybody has said about you, done to you, including yourself, that we can create that within ourselves, a place where there is a middle ground where we become aware of those fears and of those judgments. I believe that we have to have that home within us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so funny because I like to spend the first half sort of talking about, what happened and then talk about solution. But you really just said it right there, that whole idea of being compassionate towards yourself and the actual process. People are like, I want to do the work. I don't know what the work is. And you just perfectly described it. Like that whole how you treat yourself and move and through challenging situations.
Well, at the middle of the book is the point that you were describing, where, I mean, I was at Linwood Women's Facility on my knees, having no idea how I had relapsed. I'd had to turn myself in, and trying with all my might, all my self-will, all my to-do list, the daily routine, the, clearing up wreckage, all this stuff, so vehemently on my self-will, and didn't understand how I had picked up a drink. I stopped, yet regardless, I still had to admit that I had had a drink, which is not allowed when I was on probation. I'm just revealing it all right here. And so I was on my knees in that, where you're just like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Like, in the depths of darkness. And that was when I had the answer. The answer was not in the you. It wasn't in me or my mind. It was, stop beating your head against the wall. You don't have to do this. Let the universe, like, just give it all up. And my father's spirit and a kid that I had represented and was freed, and that later was struck and hit by a car and died, their formless, like, energy came to me. And it was, this is not you. You know your truth. In non-words, but a sense. And that was really, really where I just was ready to accept whatever came. I had owned up to everything, was proud of some things that I had cleared and accomplished, yet it was that point where I just let go and started really building that home within and understanding how trauma had so deeply affected me. It was that final work that had to be done. And that's the blessing of that relapse that I see today.
Yeah. I mean, so often I've seen and experienced it myself, a relapse of sorts where it's just like, I cannot do it on my own. But I wonder, did you also have an experience of, like, you're so accomplished, like you've accomplished amazing things. And I wonder what was driving the need to accomplish or perform? Like, where did that come from?
So I'm the youngest of 7. And my father is Hispanic Native American, was an orphan field worker who overcame a gazillion challenges and discrimination, segregation at the time in public places in the heart of Santa Ana. And he had, his mother died of tuberculosis. And so he was raised by Mama Candy and Papa Leandro. She's Navajo and a Hashiman, and my grandfather, and he became an attorney. was a janitor, jazz musician, worked his tail off, and became one of the first Spanish speaking attorneys in the area. He was playing in his jazz band, met my mom, who's an immigrant from Germany, 5'2", blonde hair, blue eyes. My dad, very tall and dark. And so who do I look like? um,
I was joking with you before we started that you and I share that. Like, my daddy's German and my mama's from Mexico City. I was like, oh my God, this is my soul sister.
right? I love
Yeah.
it.
So
I'll
funny.
take it. I love it. You're an amazing person. It is soul sisters. But I gave that background because 7 kids in a 9-year span. It was a very busy household, and I connected with my father through a variety of things. I feel like I looked like him. I had a little racial bullying in school, yet it was significant in my brain at the time. I was experiencing some sexual trauma from a doctor and didn't understand what was happening to me. And so the similar messages about you're dirty, you're a brownie, wash your face, instilled in me, it was me versus the world. And the trauma understanding and building blocks in my mind were like, I'm in a box. There really wasn't any emotional connection, or what I now know. And one of my other favorite books is a healthy attachment book that I have right here. So there wasn't real secure attachment and learning of anything about what to do when there was some significant trauma. And what I've learned is that when that's not in place, like this zone of tolerance isn't there, and we do flight, freeze, or fawn. And at the time it was, I'm a little brown girl and I'm going to save the world. And so that's where those quote unquote, it wasn't about achieving or accomplishing. It literally was, that's how I saw light and love in the world, is I saw people doing good things and I wanted to replicate it. And it's what brought me joy from a really young age. I was raising, money for the Live Aid support of starving kids in Ethiopia. And I had my older brothers were in a band. And so there were bands like that they would play, like U2 and others, REM, with a connection with Amnesty International. So I was doing Amnesty International petitions to free people imprisoned abroad at a very young age, and was in student government. And when there were issues in the family, like my father's religious, as a Catholic, was opposing to some of my older sisters. So they just suddenly left. My mom suddenly left for a short time to Germany due to his drinking that I really never noticed, other than I saw that he was the one that could cry alone, or he would play on the piano, and I was drawn to somebody showing their feelings. And then a couple of friends were sent away for some eating disorders. So there were some things going on growing up in that frame of mind, in that survival mode. I'm saving the world. Give me my to-do list. Big dreaming. My father was giving speeches to students to dream big. He had sued the same school district that he had gone to for discriminatory ability grouping, where they were testing kids in English only, and they were being misdiagnosed as mentally retarded. And so what he had experienced as a child was happening in a more modern form. And so he sued and he won, and was just a unifier in the community. My mom was like Catholic Woman of the Year, helping Vietnamese refugees. So a lot of examples of giving back that came from their own survival modes. My mom having grown up in the war. So both of them had overcome so much and were hard workers that gave back. And I replicated that in my survival mode. So I know I'm going back and forth here, but
No, you're good.
in high school, I always was a go-getter. But it wasn't for me. It was
Right.
to help other people. And, homecoming queen, ASB vice president, and on that saving the world mode, I got into UCLA and really didn't think that I could go. My father's supporting several others in local colleges. And I'll never forget the moment when I put the acceptance letter in front of him. He had gone to Cal State Long Beach and then graduated from UCLA Law School. So UCLA was just surreal. And we came up with a plan, and I worked throughout college. Loved UCLA. It opened my world to so much. I was a sociology major with a specialization in juvenile justice. I did a lot of field studies, interned at places like In Living Color and the David Kenyon Juvenile Justice Center. And I experienced a very, very violent rape in college that stopped all of that and put me right back into the 5-year-old little girl, very detached from my feelings, very disassociated, in a middle ground mode, I'd like to call it, not aware at all of triggers, psychological triggers. I have lost really all kind of spiritual connection. Having grown up Catholic was not my thing. So I do understand people that have a reaction to the word Jesus and God, a completely. Yet at this time, it was a very detached mode. It led me into an abusive relationship in college, some controlled eating. And what did I do? I, again, just set out to save the world and everything outside me, and wanted to follow in my father's footsteps. Went to law school, felt a surge again of hope, and saw the next step in life. Felt closer to my father's spirit and work and inspiration than ever. And he abruptly passed away from a heart attack. And my life was never the same in the young woman. How do I relate to men mode?
How old were you when your father passed away?
21.
Oof, so young.
And the thing about that was, because I had not learned the workings of my mind and the hardcore trauma effects and survival modes, he symbolized, as a physical symbol, the hope, the light, the good in the world. And it made absolutely no sense to me when he abruptly passed. It was the whole future of working with him, the symbolism. There was a lot of bad things happening in the world, but he symbolized the movement of good.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's amazing. When did like drinking enter the picture? Had you been drinking already casually, or had
No, I probably had a cooler in high school.
Bartles and James?
I mean, me and my roommates, we would have wine. And there was definitely a couple of way over drinking nights, but I could count them on one hand. It was normal college experiences.
Right.
I think I smoked a joint or two. I I tried, I think, ecstasy once. But I had no issues whatsoever in terms of powerlessness or anything of that sort until I believe that my self-medicating and powerless began after my father died, because
Mm.
I remember clearly sitting down in my apartment with, and this is maybe a year later, with my best friend who had written a song about me and his death called "The Legacy He Left This World Is You." And she played it for me, Priscilla, she's in the book. And I remember clearly sitting down on the floor with her and drinking wine. And that was the only way I was able to connect to my feelings, the only way, I'm putting in
Mm.
quotes, because
Mhm.
of the powerlessness and picking up another drink and picking up another drink. When I look back and when I've written that step out, um, that's where I have noted, I believe the powerlessness began. Now, I finished law school. I moved back with my mom and very, very much detached from really any connection to my feelings. I had to not drink to get through law school. I had to help my mom. I had to study. I had to manage a whole bunch of stuff. And I graduated. I became an attorney. I had moved back to Santa Ana, his hometown, where my mom and my parents were living when he passed, and was elected to the school board. I began representing a wrongfully convicted kid. I felt again this surge of hope, of purpose, and more connected to his spirit than ever. And on the way back from work, I was hit by a big rig and died. I wasn't breathing when they found me, and had 22 broken bones, a punctured lung, and my brain bled. And that experience I would like to share about. But after that, um, it just was a whole nother survival mode. But the near-death experience was really hard to come to terms with back in physical life. I know that sounds funny, but
No, it doesn't. I mean, for people who've experienced like had like I feel like alcoholism can be like summed up as a near death experience, but that's like I mean, a car accident to that magnitude. I mean, that is so profoundly traumatizing. And you've already mentioned like several things that in and of themselves, take some people down forever. And it's just so amazing that you were able to continue moving forward and accomplishing so much and helping other people. Um, and I know you kind of shared about like that experience of in was it the Linwood facility where you sort of had your final, surrender moment. I mean, it just seems like there was so much in between, and listen, I want to encourage people to read the book because there were so many things that you had to overcome. And I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and talking about um, how it was that you started your journey to recovery. You had mentioned some of the trauma therapy. How did you find a trauma therapist, or how did you know that that's what you needed in addition to things like rehab or 12-step?
well, in between the car accident and the Linwood was a decade.
That's a
And
lot. Yeah.
and yeah, after the car accident and seeing the only truth and the experience, the outer body experience, and connecting with my father's spirit and innumerable others, and then being back in a body, I had to learn to walk again. And the purpose became these posters and this Licenciada Davis get better. And so in the height of continuing the fight to free Arthur Carmona, part of which I was still in a wheelchair, I met my ex-husband, and that began an exposure to a drug that was the beginnings of the physical trigger of having been IV'd to morphine after the accident. So after the accident, it was like a month of IV to morphine. I got back after the wheelchair, into my heels and suit. I started managing with processing issues, memory issues, chronic pain, all the flashbacks from the prior trauma alcoholically. And then was introduced to a drug on a second date, got pregnant on that second date, married him with a proposal over the phone, and my life completely changed into further public life, as he was the state attorney general at the time. Now, I mention all that in a nutshell because the public life further ingrained the survival mode in me, and sobriety was there. I had the amazing best thing that ever happened to me was becoming a mother. And my oldest son, Diego, all my sons are so amazing, but I do believe that the universe brought his soul into me to reconnect to the experience that I had when I wasn't breathing. And I focused solely on him, and the connection emotionally, the trauma what wasn't there in my marriage at all. The trauma triggers kept coming, and I began getting in this robotic mode. No self-care, no spiritual grounding. So again, it was trauma, chronic pain, depression, a whole bunch of stuff. We lost a child in utero. My brother attempted suicide under our roof. Arthur Carmona was struck and killed. All of that happened within a year. And I reached out for help at Kaiser for my drinking. It is there that I met a man who I thought was a peer, who I thought I was helping. And in a time when my ex-husband and I separated due to all the unaddressed stuff and his unhealthy responses to my unaddressed stuff, we decided it was best for Diego, for he and I to live separately. And during that time, I began a short relationship with someone who I thought was my peer, who I thought said, who I believed him. He said, "You can cry with me. You're safe here." I had never been told anything like that, nor had any connection with a peer. And I fit right into the mold of a man that then took personal photos, blackmailed us, exploited me online, and went to the press. And it was that layer of the public shaming that had me on my knees. How many years later in Linwood Women's Facility? I had tried with all my might to work on my own internal shaming through my self-will. But what was still becoming the roadblock was this public layer of shaming. And I had not connected to the only truth that matters, which is we are all infinite beings, full, perfect, and complete, and it is unchanged by anything anybody has said or done. And so by the time I was there on my knees, I had done 12-step recovery. I had begun therapy, not real intensive trauma therapy, like EMDR. and some other modalities, but the true core surrender out of my survival mode hadn't really happened until those moments there. So, and I had never had a drug relapse. I have 13 years sobriety. I had had alcohol relapses, and so I know that they're one and the same, but that one was an alcohol relapse. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I really love the fact that you were able to take those experiences and really confront your shame. And this is my interpretation of your experience, so please feel free to correct me where I'm off. But it just seems like it took so much courage to be able to learn from those experiences and really heal your shame through, different healing modalities. And I love talking about the healing modalities, right? Because at some point we recognize that, pain recognizes pain, right? And, there's always these components of like obsession and confusion and, trying to manage all that pain. But when we start to move towards actual, like trauma, like, would you call it intensive trauma therapies? Like
yeah.
that's when things really start to heal at that core level. What was your experience with EMDR like?
So in that process, I had to, for the first time, go back into a memory, a vision, a place where I found myself throughout my adult life. It would just enter my head. And there were two. One was this small doctor's office, but it's not really the office, it's where I sat, where I lay there. And then the other is a closet that I would hide in. And it's so important to mention to trauma survivors, and I believe all of us are, that there's no beating ourselves up. But I never understood the psychological feeling of that I would find myself in when a memory would come back. And it just was kind of like, oh, it was the concussion, or oh, my memory's bad. Things of that sort. And so with therapy, I was able to talk about like current issues and feelings and things of that sort. With trauma therapy, I literally had to go back into that room. Now I made a list of, she made me write out a list of different traumas, and I didn't know where to start. I just didn't know what space. She's the one that said, this is the core one, this space. So with this modality of this light that goes back and forth, it was too much for me and I couldn't connect. And we had to do it several times. And she held one, and it was really in that space that just everything, everything, everything made complete sense. So it wasn't just one, it was several sessions. And I knew this woman. She works, both of them are in the book, Kimmy Hodges Hunkel and Miriam Hall. You know, I felt safe with them. They knew the stuff that happened after, but this was like the little Nadia. And it's my understanding, me and the world, I took control of the situation as a little girl, but that didn't happen until I myself pictured myself as a woman, as a mother, holding her, holding Nadia, and flying out of there on an eagle with her in my arms and just putting it in its place. A latter one was what resulted in an assault by the gentleman that I referred to as the later in the latter trauma that happened. When I started recognizing some of the things that were happening online, he was asked and I was violently assaulted, and I had to relive not all of it, but enough where again I was able to take control of that situation. Now, today, I mean, trauma work isn't a done deal, especially when there's adult trauma. The childhood stuff, yes, I know there's different survival modes that come up in me, and I can recognize them. And the beauty of being a mom is I'm able to observe them. So with the adult trauma, however, this is living the work. When there is any person or anybody where there is a situation where my core truth, who I am, is questioned, whether it's my loyalty, my commitment, anything of that sort, and someone will say something, for me today, because that is exactly what the press did, it was a don't believe her story. This is what happens to survivors. It is to discredit them, to make them unbelievable, unstable, whatever it might be, so that the perpetrator isn't held accountable.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so for me today, that's why I'm so strong about banning shaming and then banning
Yeah.
the shame within, is because when we are connected to our truth, and there is anything of that sort in my life today, I live the work, and I have to ground myself in knowing my truth and letting others just go about whatever they might think. So
Yeah, that's a lot. It's so amazing that you're able to turn all of this pain into, they say turning your mess into your message. And I know now that, you've written the book and you're a Kundalini yoga instructor. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do? Like, I'm not sure I fully understand what Kundalini yoga is, and maybe you can share a little bit about the work that you offer today.
absolutely. Kundalini sounds like a roller coaster, but it's a word that's used for an energy source that begins at our spine. And I was introduced to Kundalini yoga at the same place where I began my trauma therapy, a small treatment center for trauma and addiction recovery for women called Dee's House. And when I first sat down, it was pain in my body, yet through the use of mantra and sound in Kundalini yoga, that is what I needed to begin to even connect with my breath. So Kundalini yoga uses a lot of sound, a lot of mantra to use our breath to empower this energy source in our spine. Kundalini yoga it's a vast technology, as we like to call it. It's mind, body, spirit. And there is a tune in, and then a kriya, an exercise set, and then a tune out. And everyone includes a meditation. So it's exercises and a meditation. And the work that I am doing now with the recent book release really is just holding healing sessions on Sundays, and then yoga on Sundays, and then Fridays spiritual advocacy, which is helping others connect to building a home within themselves where they can ban their own shame and be aware of their attack thoughts. And then in that space, we can recognize when others are projecting theirs and do the second part of spiritual advocacy, which is having compassionate responses, but more importantly, sometimes just having a shield around us when we're aware of our fears and judgments. We are far more aware when others are projecting theirs. This also applies when we're trying to encourage others to continue going back to the rooms. Is again, when we're connected to our truths, we can see when others are and not allow that to prevent us from walking into any room that might help us, including 12 steps.
Yeah.
And so the third part is spiritual advocacy. And so is compassionate justice is the third part. So I'm really encouraging any cause, any effort that is about supporting, sharing our stories, sharing survivor stories that is against shaming. But the work that I'm doing right now is a lot of live Instagram and then a lot of just holding healing sessions and yoga.
That's beautiful. If somebody is interested in connecting with you, what is the best, other than your book, everyone's got to get the book, but what's the best way to connect with you? You mentioned Instagram Live or
That's at
Instagram.
Nadia Maria Davis is Instagram. There's a lot there. And then the website, I really encourage you to go to because it has all the events and yoga links. And then it has, it just everything is there. It's www.nadia-davis.com. And there's a monthly newsletter or journals, I like to call it. And yeah, the website and Instagram.
Those are the two best places.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, the book is amazing. Congratulations on doing such an amazing job. I feel like everything you do is just big and super impactful. So I'm so honored that you were able to sit with me today and share your story and all these amazing resources for healing, really addressing root cause. I'm obsessed with addressing root cause, healing that. So I think the work you're doing is profound, and just thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Powerful message. So thank you for the work you do, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.